We are not recording the closed session, just the open session from 9 a.m. to 10:10.
So can Eric see the room yet?
No, but I can, that's all right. I can get going anyway if you're ready. I can't see folks. I was trying to start to tick off the list of attendees based on seeing folks, but since I can't see folks, you're going to have to actually do a full roll call. Welcome everybody to Vanderbilt, except for me and a few others. In this case, after being sick for months and having a surgery about 4 weeks ago and doing well at recovery, I had the okay to travel, but Alaska Airlines did everything in their power after 12 hours of airport for me to get there, and I finally gave up and came home. So I'm with you virtually today, but not as good as having been there for some blues last night and some barbecue and those kinds of things. Cam, do you want to just go ahead and do a formal roll since we can't see most of the folks, and then we'll dive right into materials.
Sure. So we have Eric, Tram, Robert, Caleb just walked in. Lon Cargan is unavailable, just double checking if you're actually on the WebEx. We have Tina Chang. Jonathan Epstein is unavailable. Alejandra Gebb, we're expecting her on WebEx. We don't see her yet. We have Miriam Guzman in the room. Ana Carolina Machado is expected on WebEx. She's on? Yes. Okay.
Yes, I'm here.
Terry Magnuson is here. Mari Lynn Miranda is here. Ray Patrick Lake is on WebEx. Is on WebEx? Erica
Good morning.
is here. Prashant Shah is here. Greg Simon is here. We expect Sharon Terry on WebEx. She's not on yet. We are also expecting David Williams on WebEx. We don't see him yet. And Teresa Zayas-Kaban is unavailable. Yeah.
You skipped me.
I'm sorry, Marilyn, I checked you off. Thank you. Marilyn Ritchie is here. I apologize. I saw you and I marked you. You're accounted for. Thank you. I apologize.
No problem.
All right. Well, hearing no others, so I will just get us started. So we're doing an open session, but unlike some of our open that are live, we didn't have equipment to set it up this way. So we're recording it, and then we'll post it later on. This is about an hour and 10-minute session from 9 till about 10:10 when we'll take a break. I'll give a quick overview, and then think of it as Groundhog Day. It's often true. We're going to do shorter versions of discussions around engagement core that Dara and Consuelo Wilkins will be involved, or will leading those discussions. Then the Research Hub overview with Josh Denny. And then we'll have more time in closed session to go into those in a whole lot more depth, including some demos and things that would be difficult to do online. So let me kick it off. Oh, wait, I've got the slides up, so that's fine. If you go to the next slide, I believe it should be some happy pictures of Tennessee. I am disappointed not to get there for multiple reasons. My wife's from Knoxville, the Knoxville World's Fair Tower, for those of you that recognize it, and many of the rest of these are Nashville. You see the Grand Ole Opry there. You see some pictures in the bottom left. Nashville was one of our launch sites with our partners at 50 Forward and at Vanderbilt there. Great to have them be one of our launch sites. I hope that you're going to be able to get some good food that we don't have in Portland. We're way too healthy here. We need to transplant bread to Portland. So if anybody wants to send it out to me, that would be great. This is our first in the field advisory panel meeting. So this is an experiment of, instead of hearing just from me, hearing directly from awardees in the sites that they're located at. So this is our first. Second will be in Seattle in the fall. If you go to the next slide, you know, the this quick overview. Oh, well, I do want to thank our host, Vanderbilt, and the Jean and Alexander Hurd Libraries for hosting. I got to see the room briefly. Oh, wait, it's back up. Even better now. It does not look like we're in a federal building or in a hotel in Bethesda, and that's a good thing. So we're out of the basement of one of the Bethesda hotels. So that's an accomplishment and has moved forward. So I'm just going to give you a quick overview really quickly about enrollment, and then I'm going to over to Dara to lead the discussion around engagement, and then the research hub with Josh Denny, Q&A there, and we've got time for much more in-depth Q&A in the closed session as we revisit these in even more depth than we're going to do at the beginning. So again, on the next slide, the basic story. Enrollment continues to go well. I mean, you all met with Stephanie in late May. The enrollment continues to be strong now at about over 265,000 people who have started the process, over 220,000 who have actually consented, and 166,000 plus who have actually completed the entire core protocol. Often about 3,000, sometimes more people per week completing the entire protocol and signing up. So that's going well. There's 369 clinics open right now, another 100 or so planned to go just in what our first site to open that up. And we're preparing the new infrastructure to support a lot more direct volunteer sites, which will help us reach more states. It's taken us a long time. We'll dive into this in more depth in the closed session to get some thoughts and advice from people. It's taken us a lot longer to get the non-traditional way of recruiting people, the direct volunteer mechanism up and running. So the majority of these people are still brought in through the health provider organization mechanism. We're seeing signs of life and some new infrastructure in place to support the direct volunteer model. So good progress. I mean, our job one, we talked to you about the priority areas in the last meeting. Job one is recruitment and retention. And on that front, we're all hands on deck to develop our first retention metrics, but also to just continue to drive that awareness engine, that engagement engine of building relationships, and then trying to convert some of those relationships to participants who sign up and join. Next slide. We should do the clapper. Would be good. Still going to the next slide?
We are. There's a lag. There's a lag.
It's my rural internet. Sounds like a William Wordsworth poem. No, I don't think so. We're doing well on gender and on race and ethnicity. We're doing well on underrepresented biomedical research. Remember, our goal over the long term of the program was 70% underrepresented in biomedical research. You know, we're over that now significantly, about 81% and 52% of that based on race and ethnicity. The two numbers in the last page and this one sometimes differ. That's important because participants can mark more than one race ethnicity category. So we're currently 108%, right? Because people are actually marking more than 1%. So, I mean, you could imagine we would be having a problem in a discussion with the advisory panel at this point in our life saying, people signing up, that's not the problem. We aren't achieving our race and ethnicity, that's not the problem. I think our challenge is really, and the next great challenge is, maintain that recruitment, but drive retention. Are we building enough value and relationships with our participants to actually carry that forward? And we'll discuss some of that throughout the day. On the next slide, we can actually time the internet delay here. The geography, it is people from all 50 states. You can see the to the left, and this is without us doing any particular campaigns to pull in more people of age ranges. We'll talk a little bit today about where we are with regional campaigns, and we'll have opportunities to sort of address those. We only have just released 4 additional language kits, so simplified Chinese, Vietnamese, Korean, and Arabic. If there was one area in terms of race ethnicity, it was some of the Asian language categories, and as we're working towards, okay, we've got now some of the collateral translated into these languages, we have a better chance of doing proactive recruitment campaigns in those areas, and also are continuing to build more capacity around interactive mobile exhibits that can go to remote parts of the country and sort of go to where people are. Next slide. Okay, there it is. I'll always chain you with music if possible. So just a reminder, when Stephanie talked to you in the last meeting about those priority areas, a few of the top ones are in spirit of recruitment and retention, improving the participant experience, launching genomics, and launching the researcher workbench. And that's a lot. That's pretty much the primary things that the consortium is focused on right now. We'll talk a little bit about some new investments we've done on the direct volunteer front to really get that up and going. And we're going to hear a lot today about engagement, particularly the engagement around getting participant input. These pictures are from some recent meetings that Dara and I did with our CPGI partners, Community Partner Initiative. These are really the bread and butter of achieving those UBR numbers that we're actually doing. These are often national or regional partners who have a local presence in parts of the country. This was our first face-to-face meeting just a couple months ago. It was amazing to watch this group network and be like, wait, we know so-and-so here, and they just start expanding their network without any encouragement from us. I think it's a natural thing to do for those who spend a lot of their time in community organizing. Is the networks that they started to build with each other are even stronger than the power of the individual board. So amazing progress there. Dara and Dr. Consuelo Wilkins will actually share that as we go. We'll talk a little bit about launching genomics and then launch researcher workbench, which again, you're going to hear a lot about today. The two big values of being here at Vanderbilt today are hearing directly from Dr. Wilkins about the engagement core, and then hearing directly from Dr. Denny and a range of other Vanderbilt colleagues about what's going on with the researcher workbench. So that's just kind of a preview of what's to come throughout the day, a little bit of enrollment over that. And let me turn it over to Dara to jump in a little bit more detail on what's going on with engagement, and then followed up by Josh. We'll have a little bit of time for Q&A, and then that will finish open session, and we can dive more detail in closed session. I will turn it over to Dara and/or Consuelo.
Thank you so much, Eric. Tram told me that I had to come to the podium, so that's why I'm here. Sometimes I follow instructions. But really just excited to be back with this group and sharing some of the highlights of the great work that we're doing in our engagement team, really to build a robust infrastructure that we know is necessary to actualize meaningful and impactful engagement, and as Eric said, ultimately to retain diverse communities and individuals from all walks of life in our program. Many of you know that I sat where you were a couple years ago prior to joining the All of Us leadership team, and I really had an honor to serve on the advisory panel, which is helping to shape the program from the ground up. But now as the Chief Engagement Officer, together with my awesome team, I've had the great opportunity to build on the exceptional foundation that many of you in this room and on the call have laid. And you'll probably think I'm a little biased, and admittedly I am, but very objectively I can say that while we have a tremendous amount of work yet to be done, our engagement infrastructure is really taking great shape. And over the next few minutes, I'm just going to provide you with a high-level overview of some of the key components of our ever-growing and developing engagement infrastructure landscape. And then after my brief overview, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Consuelo Wilkins, who directs our engagement core, to highlight some of the unprecedented work that we are doing to live out one of our program's core and key values, which is participants as partners. So next slide. Click. Okay, great. So this, what you see here, is our engagement infrastructure. There are so many critical components of this structure, and we're committed to adding new and exciting elements as we learn and grow. I'm going to just, to start, I'm just going to share a few of the key elements that we already have in place. Moving clockwise from the top, we have our community and provider partners. Eric talked a little bit about that, but in addition to the community and provider gateway partners, which is a group of more than 35 national, regional, and local organizations, we have 5 national community partners. And we really are so fortunate to have more than 40 funded partners who are really allowing us to borrow their trust and respect that they have in communities. And they do events, they do activities, and I agree with Eric wholeheartedly that I do believe that they are creating that pipeline that is allowing us to have the great diversity that we have in our program. Next, you see our participant partners, and that's where Dr. Wilkinson's going to talk about. So I'm going to skip right over that. But I think the one thing that I will say there is, in my humble opinion, participants are the heart and soul of our program, and that's my story. I'm sticking to it. The National Network of Libraries of Medicine. This is an organization with over 7,100 member organizations. That includes academic libraries, health sciences libraries, public libraries, and also pharmaceutical and other biomedical libraries. And they have a community engagement network that's working with our program to enhance education, awareness of our program, and very importantly, to help us bridge the digital divide, given our program's highly digital nature. And just being in communities, they can meet people where they are, and that's very, very important. They're also positively impacting our program through a speaker series, and all of us speaker series Dr. Collins and I did an inaugural session in March, and they also provide very rich content and expertise to help us build out our training and educational materials. Moving along the line in the purple at the bottom, you see the local community advisory boards and participant advisory boards. This is really a key element of our on-the-ground strategy. Our engagement team provides best practice, capacity building tools, and supports to ensure that all awarding partners implement participant and community advisory boards who meet regularly, who are knowledgeable about our program, and whose members are representative of the participants in their communities, and also, very important, whose members have a passion, commitment, determination, and the courage to speak up, to identify program challenges and opportunities, but most importantly, to help us find solutions to optimize the outreach, the education, the engagement and retention efforts on both the local and national levels. Next, you see the engagement leads. This was one of my first official acts after joining the All of Us research program, was to create this group of individuals who are responsible for representing the awardee engagements across the consortium. They're key thought leaders. They're designated by their respective principal investigators at the awardee level, and we meet regularly with them to share best practice, lessons learned, and also to co-create with them. Work collaboratively with them to design, develop, and implement impactful All of Us capacity building, engagement, and retention strategies. Eric talked a little bit about the mobile engagement assets. These are actually experiential learning vehicles, which many of you know. We now have two. One is launched in 2017, and the second, as you know, launched late last year with the capacity for provision of blood and urine specimens. So you can complete the whole protocol if you wish. And these really are impactful. They go to health fairs. They really are a nice way to expose communities who wouldn't ordinarily have access to our program, to our program. So that's great. Frontline staff leads, as you can see at the top. Really, the vision for this key engagement and capacity building initiative came from Eric after he personally met with the consortium frontline staff and engaged them in a discussion about what it was they need. And much like the vision for our engagement leads, the convening of our frontline staff, typically their research associates, came out of a desire to build a capacity, the knowledge, and the effectiveness of employees who are truly on the front line. These are the individuals who are often providing the very first impressions of the All of Us research program to potential participants. And so our goal is to make sure that these key team leaders have the tools and information they need to do their jobs very well, and it's going very, very well with those groups. So as I close, as I mentioned before, I just want to, I have a couple of slides that highlight some accomplishments of our community partners. I'm not sure why it's so small, but the national community partners that we talked about, we have Delta Research and Education Foundation, PrideNet for All of Us, we have National Alliance for Hispanic Health, 50 Forward, and we added just recently Asian Health Coalition. And collectively, these 5 national community partners have hosted more than 300 digital and non-digital events in 28 states from 75 active sites across the country. They've contributed over 23 op-eds, articles, blogs, hosted nearly 100 events in partnership with our mobile engagement assets, bringing all of us directly to their respective communities. And while their milestones are really limited to awareness and engagement, as Eric said, we really are asking them to help us direct people to our website, and hopefully they will help people get more interested and enroll in our program. Similarly, for the CPGI partners, since October 2017, this is that network of over 30 national and community and provider organizations They have actually sub-awardees under their group, over 140 sub-awardees, more than 1,500 digital events, op-eds. As you can see, they're really blanketing the nation with activities about our program. I think Eric said something about you can fly over the states and you can see anywhere, you can see there's something happening about all of us. And we're very excited to be contributing to that. So we really are excited about what we've done to date, but even as we celebrate how far we've come, we're also looking ahead and mapping out the next steps to help us continue to achieve impactful, meaningful, and value-added bi-directional engagement and retention in our program. And because I'm sticking to my story that our participant partners are the heart and soul of the program, it now gives me great pleasure to turn it over to Dr. Wilkins, who, as you know, may know, is the VP for Health Equity and the co-PI of the Vanderbilt Recruitment Innovation Center. She is the director of our engagement core, and she's working with our team to meaningfully engage participant partners in the program. She's modest, she has a lot of skills, but she's really a nationally known expert who, as you know, is widely recognized for developing and testing innovative methods to impactfully engage participants. And she was just recently appointed to the Secretary's Distinguished Advisory Committee on Human Research Protection. So we're really fortunate to have Consuelo on our team to help us shape our game-changing and groundbreaking work to live out our value of participants and partners. Consuelo.
Aaron, thanks so much for the overview of the really comprehensive approach and infrastructure you've developed for engagement and for the kind introduction. Welcome to Nashville, to those of you who are in the room and those of you who are virtual. We'll see you next time. As Darren mentioned, we have the responsibility for really engaging participants as partners in the program. And for those of you who are really familiar with the initial working group report or been on the advisory panel for a long time, you're familiar with this phrase, participants as partners, one of the really themes in the initial in the report, and it's really been a pleasure for us to bring that to life. So just for starting ground here, I want to make sure that we're on the same page about engagement versus recruitment. This is something that for a program that's going to have 1 million or more people, there's a lot of focus on recruitment, and we're specifically, as the engagement core, focusing on engaging participants who've already enrolled in aspects of the research. So in general, when we think about engagement, it's bi-directional, it's involving stakeholders in some aspect of the program, and it's not the ultimate goal of enrolling in a study. And that can be confusing because if you do engagement well, you actually will increase recruitment. And so a lot of DARE's efforts and focus with the national and regional partners has been in the space of awareness and acceptance. And that's part of the recruitment continuum. So sometimes we forget that people who've not been exposed to research before, who don't really know a lot about clinical trials, not only have to be aware, but they have to accept that this is something that they want to participate in. And we're talking about so many groups that have been marginalized or underrepresented. The process of getting them to accept that invitation to be a part of a study involves that they know more about it, they trust, that they believe that despite the historical abuses, this is a good program. So a lot of effort goes into engaging groups around awareness and acceptance, but that doesn't always yield recruitment. And if you're only doing that for recruitment, then we're missing the bigger picture, which is that if we're really engaging participant communities, our research, we believe, is going to be better, it's going to be more relevant, it's going to hopefully lead to, translate into discoveries that will be put into practice quicker. So our mission for our engagement core is, again, focusing on engaging participants who are already enrolled in the study in all aspects of the research program. We've assembled what I think is an amazing team of people, most of them here in Nashville. So in the room, I have really the people who do the brunt of the work. Alicia, Selena, and Juan are leading the operations. They're liaising with the participants. They know them well. They have great contact with them. We have faculty leaders though who are really thought leaders in engagement. Kareem Watson is at the University of Illinois, and Liz Cohn is in New York. Laura Beskow is here, and she's done some phenomenal work around really understanding consent and rigorously involving participants in different aspects of research. And part of her team, Kate Brelsford and Catherine Hammock, are really helping us to do our evaluation, as is Melinda Aldrich, who's newer to our team. We have 3 aims. They really focus on creating the infrastructure to integrate participants in all aspects of the program. And second aim is making sure that we have some explicit ways of identifying a diverse group of people who can participate in these roles, and then removing all of those barriers to them actually participating. And then finally, not just for our sake, but for research in general, we really need to assess engagement and be able to demonstrate its impact on the program. How is it changing? What are we doing differently because we now have these participant voices at the table? As we began this core, we were just actually awarded, I say just, although it seems like a long time, we were just brought into the program in January of 2018. So in about 18 months, we've accomplished what I think is a lot. I think the team, not necessarily me, but other members of the team make it look easy. But we really do put a lot of emphasis on making sure that we understand what the needs are of the individuals that we're bringing on board, making sure that we communicate clearly to them. We have lots of protocols, processes in place to be assured that we are compensating them for their time, that we have structures in place when they have to travel, that we pay for their travel in advance, that we are considering the needs of the participants who have challenges with ambulation or need different things for their diet, that we are proactively making sure that we know everything they need so that when they arrive to a meeting or they're able to participate, then they are fully present and their voices can be heard. So we definitely believe that participants can provide meaningful input, and often we're just in their way. So we do our best to try and clear the way for them. We currently have 36 individuals who are participating in different roles in all of us. So they're serving on the steering committee, executive committee, they are participant ambassadors here on the advisory panel with you, and we have a director's think tank. I'll say that when we initially proposed this engagement core, for those of us, any of you who are familiar with engagement know, oftentimes you have to say you're going to do a lot because you expect people are going to tell you it's too much and you have to get rid of some things. I was really so pleased when I met with Eric and Dara that they actually added more work for us. So maybe others on the team weren't happy to have more work added, but I was really delighted that because the steering committee is so big, Eric and Dara thought, we need to have participants who are actually on the executive committee in that smaller group providing input. And Eric also really wanted to have a group of people who are in DC, who the leadership could bounce ideas off, do some in-person work with. So those are actually things that we didn't initially propose. So the left in blue, those are things that we're already doing. We have planned, and hopefully we'll have our first participant polling being a return of results, return of value survey that will launch to participants sometime soon. And then we also have plans for making available engagement studios, which are one-time sessions where you can get specific feedback on a particular project or idea. These are the individuals who are currently serving in these roles. Miriam is making a face about her picture, sorry. These are individuals who, before the launch of the program, were participants, and we asked for volunteers in the newsletter in February 2018. We were hoping that we'd get a few people interested. We got more than 100 people who responded to this call for individuals. It was available in both English and Spanish, and we went through a process of blindly reviewing their personal statements, why they wanted to be involved. And then we selected 15 of them that we then interviewed. And then we made our final selections based on some diversity we hope to have in the program. So again, these are the 6 individuals. Michael, Catherine, Michelle, and Richard serve on the steering committee. Michelle and Richard also serve on the executive committee. And it's been really great to have their voices there. I think any of you who've been in those rooms know that they are really well-accepted members of those committees. They speak up, they're involved. And we're pleased to see that some culture has shifted in some ways, and that's perhaps going to be one of the biggest changes that we see, but may not be able to measure as well as we'd like. So we expect that they will receive meeting materials in advance. Some of them are taking their lunch break, and if they don't have meeting materials in advance, we're expecting them to attend these weekly meetings. There's no chance that they'll actually be prepared enough to participate in these really fast-paced meetings. So we push for that, and happy to say that despite some, we can't do that initially, the program really has stepped up and made a commitment to getting those meeting materials out at least 24 hours in advance, and we're tracking that. So we follow the timestamp when those materials were released so that we can actually report on that. We also have 22 individuals. They represent each of the health provider organizations and FQHCs. These are our participant ambassadors. There are also 3 who are representing the VA and 3 who are representing the direct volunteers group. These individuals were nominated by the engagement leads Dara mentioned, and they are serving in a different role. So they have monthly meetings where they can deliberate on things that we put in front of them. They can also propose ideas, concerns, projects. And so we've got a great group there. Kareem Watson leads that and is co-chaired by 2 of those participant ambassadors. Those individuals, as well as the participant partners I mentioned, are serving on all of these governance entities. So those individuals are actually involved in these work groups, subgroups, committees, boards, and we've gone through all of the processes of actually making sure they understand what that looks like, that they are committed, that they know the time commitment, that we provide all of the acronyms, the list of things, expectations. And this is also another culture change in that we wanted to make sure that the participants could actually identify the committees or boards they wanted to most participate in, so they could self-nominate and we could help them decide that. And that decision of which of these they participate in is not up to the program, it's up to us as the engagement corps with Dara's approval, where they best fit. And we're looking forward to seeing how they are able to help shape change and be involved here. The Directors Think Tank I mentioned, this is a group of people who are actually live in DC. They have varied experiences with a small group like this where, it's hard to get all of the diversity that you want, but there's so many layers of, different perspectives here from people who've never participated in research, who are really, had health conditions that make them strong advocates. But we also had a process in place, so you'll see the theme. There's always a process. How do we identify people in a way that we think is equitable with calling for nominations, reviewing them, and then selecting them and onboarding them in a way that we think is going to be beneficial to the program. So some of the things this group has done is they provided some input early on concerns about privacy, how to address those, had an in-person session. Eric's idea of some boxes and boards and building visions and through iterations, which is always interesting to see the different perspectives there. And we're looking forward to moving them into additional work. Hopefully they'll get to see some upcoming work with the Mood app and some other things that are being proposed. These are just great pictures of the groups. We had a retreat with them. Again, getting all of these people to DC with their varying needs from all across the country. This is the session back in October with the think tank in person. And again, the boxes, you can see Eric and Dara and John Daojang, and working with them. And this is our first time where the participant ambassadors actually provided some feedback to the steering committee in person on what they thought would be the most important things to first return in general, but also specifically related to genetics and genomics. And then I'll end with just a snapshot of our approach to evaluation. It really is multi-pronged. We are focusing not just on subjective qualitative feedback, quantitative feedback, but also objective feedback. So we have their mentors, PIs who are mentors to the steering committee members. We are evaluating it from both their experiences as a mentor-mentee. And by the way, there was a process for that. The PIs actually had to fill out a form. They had to tell us why they wanted to be a mentor, and we chose based on that. We are hopefully later today we'll get to talk some about the readiness survey. So we have surveyed the consortium members to really understand if they're ready for this kind of engagement, what are their perceptions, and making sure that we'll be prepared for that. And then finally here, the focus on how can we be objective, so blindly reviewing the meeting minutes to make sure that participants are able to have input, the timestamp for when the meeting material was sent, and then we'll be doing some pre and post documents. So if you ask for input, how do they change based on that input from participants? So I'm not sure we're supposed to get to questions yet, so I will end there. Thank you.
So let me go ahead and turn it over to Josh. We'll talk a little bit about, and again, you're getting a taste of two discussions. We can have a longer conversation. And then when Josh finishes, we'll spend a good 15 minutes on this and then take a break, and then we'll dive into deeper topics in closed sessions. So hold your questions for a few minutes. We'll hear from Josh and then have a little bit of time with Q&A to get us started.
Okay, please bear with us for a minute.
Are you on the broadcast?
I am.
Okay.
So I can share my screen.
You know, I had a meeting with Dara and Consuelo and a lot of the team there at Vanderbilt yesterday, and you know, was saying, I feel like we're doing a great job on this, but man, we have so much further to go. And our big challenge here is really, how can we continue to get an even more, both in volume and in range of, and a wide range diversity of input, but also like stay nimble and able to act quickly. And balancing those things is hard because we get a lot of input, not just from participant partners, from engagement partners, advocacy groups, and managing all of that input while also trying to, you know, innovate and move things quickly is going to be a challenge for us in an ongoing way. But we have a lot more that we can actually do on the partner front. All right, Josh, are you up? Did I patter long enough?
You did. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
You're welcome. Josh is taking my laptop to the podium.
It's a feeling of
I
power.
think that's a violation of federal law, but it's okay. I'm just saying.
All right. This will make it easier to do the live demo that we want to do. All right. Well, first, let me welcome you all to Nashville and Vanderbilt again. It's a real pleasure to have you here and have this, I guess, this first on-site advisory panel, and get a chance to talk through kind of maybe even more of a, you know, data and research center is maybe too narrow a focus as we think about all the engagement activities and pilot testing and you know, demonstration projects and things like that we're working on. But you know, we really see it as our mission to guide and really facilitate a lot of what's happening. And you've heard a great part of that from Consuelo and Dara. And I'm going to talk a little bit about the data browser and where we're headed to with the what we call our research hub as an introduction, and just a brief demo of what's live. So a brief background of what the DRC is, then we're going to go and talk about the research hub, talk about its goals, the major levels and access between public, and then once the user applies and has access to the system, what they'll have access to, and then go through a little bit of data browser tour and talk about our timelines for when new features will be coming to orient you to that. We are a multi-site group, so we're representing Vanderbilt, but Verily and Broad are huge parts of this, and Anthony Tolopakis and David Glazer as the other co-PIs with me on this project. Columbia is a huge part of this as well, really around a lot of the EHR processing and intake, and helping organize the 32 sites that are currently sending us electronic health record data, and working really on a continuous basis with those folks to pull that in, as well as our team here. And you'll hear from Robert Carroll later, who's a big part of that intake and curation team. Our responsibilities are to operationalize the data, to get it in, to make it useful, and facilitate access, to execute data security agreements. We felt like we got a side education in law, executed agreements with every data provider across the consortium, and develop secure ecosystem for researchers to share data into the program and then access it. Deliverables include our data repositories, this app that we call Health Pro, which is the way by which people facilitate the interaction with participants and inputting their data, and then tracking status of people coming into the program. The EHR upload and quality control and support. The researcher workbench is what we're going to focus mostly on today, and that's that large researcher-facing, external-facing tools that we've developed and we're working on hard now, and a number of dashboards. If you orient you to the Research Hub, and the Research Hub is live, it's an evolving entity, researchallofus.org. We have right now public sites that are live, and those include the ability to look at data snapshots, to get high-level summaries. A lot of the slides that Eric showed were taken from the data snapshots on the Research Hub, and so users, participants, media can come in and see, how many people we have recruited, what's our diversity look like, what's our geographic distribution, et cetera. And then we'll have a lot more information about the resource on the public site, and that will continue to grow as we launch the researcher workbench, especially, which is that restricted access part of the site where users will come in, develop research projects, explore that individual row level data on participants, as opposed to the aggregate data that we have on the public site. On the public side, the big parts of that, which were launched in May of 2019, are in addition to the metadata about the program, the data snapshots, the data browser, and a survey explorer. You can download and you can search through all the surveys. You can download them in English and Spanish. You see what's there, and how they were built. That's all live. It was launched at our 1-year anniversary of national launch on May 6th of 2019. And then the researcher workbench is what we're building, and we have this target date of which extends from about December to February. When we hope to be able to launch that with the initial tools to explore the data in detail, and actually develop those research projects, do exploration, do science. And the difference is going through the application process, which we were calling a data passport, by which a researcher would be verified and allowed to use the resources for exploration. The three, we divided into 3 data tiers. The public tier is what it sounds like. It's public, it's aggregate data, it's anonymous, summary statistics, basically. And then we have 2 levels of the individual row level data that researchers will access, the registered tier and the control tier. The control tier is the more restricted. That's where, everything will have obvious identifiers removed. But the control tier is where we'll put especially the rare variants, initially all the genomic data, where we're intending things like clinical notes de-identified, where those will live. And then the registered tier will have, won't have free text data. It will have all the PPI questions saved for the free text responses they provide. It will have quite a bit of electronic health record data, but we're providing more formal privacy protections. I use the word de-identified here. We're not, this is a research project where participants have given themselves, given their data access for research purposes, And in that process, it's moved out of HIPAA into a research context. So de-identified sort of in quotes. This is, we're removing all these obvious identifiers. We're guided for human subject protections by things like HIPAA, but it's not actually in HIPAA. But it's a word that we're familiar with, so I use it for ease here. The bars to get that controlled access, in addition to identifying who a researcher is and training that everyone will go through, and attestation to acceptable use, which includes a lot of education about, what is acceptable use. Certainly things like re-identification is one of those prohibited, and we advise against, research that would be stigmatizing, would not be in in public health interest, would not be in the goals of the program as well. And we have processes by which people can submit ideas and that are maybe that they're unsure about what they're going to look like. In the control tier, there will also be an institutional sign-off piece in addition to the registered tier components. And initially, everything will launch with the NIH ERA Commons login, which is a kind of login that all of us who write grants are very familiar with. It is it's international, but it is it's something that's registered to an institution and backed by an institution at the federal level. The data browser is that interactive view of the public tier participant data. It goes across electronic health record, survey responses, physical measures. I'll have to show this very shortly. The goals are really to allow people to see, what's there and get a sense of the breadth of the data, the distribution of the data, to start providing that kind of information that makes them interested and want to do more, so that they'll want to apply for access and get deeper access. Is it even worth my time to apply this? Will you have patients with prostate cancer, breast cancer, heart disease? Do you have patients that have creatinine measured in what percentage, or how many have lipids, et cetera? All these kinds of things get that initial response. And also, it helps them do things like plan their grants. As they're submitting for grants, what kind of data would be there? I mentioned we launched it in May. Currently, we have data about 116,000 people in there. We'll continue to update that over time, both for data cleanliness and also as we get new data. So the data, it's a living thing that periodically will get better with new data. Once you're an approved user and you go through that data passport process and the training and agree to the data use agreement, a potential sign-off by your institution, you'll get access to the Workbench, which is that restricted access, cloud-based environment where people can conduct analyses using either of those two data tiers. We are launching with the registered tier first is our plan, which is that more anonymous, more privacy protected data tier. The application suite includes, you'll see a lot of this later in the closed session, where we'll show you what this looks like in terms of both graphical tools to let you pick and choose cohorts, point and click interfaces, and searchable interfaces, as well as the computational interfaces where you can use common language, statistical and programming languages, initially R and Python, to do data analyses. And both of these will be supported by the research support infrastructure, both health forums and the ability to see online tutorials, webinars, and things like that will help researchers come on. I mentioned that we intend to launch the registered tier in winter. We think that at that point we may be around 200,000 participants total. The tier, the data that launches may be a little behind that based on what data are curated and ready to be released at that point. I mentioned the research support exercise around help desks and forums, training materials, and really hitting this through a number of different venues and online tools and webinars. A key part of this will be, we know that once people come into some of the programming environments, though they may be familiar with R or Python, or maybe they're familiar with other statistical packages, and we intend to expand that support over time. Using a new environment is always a bit of a lift, so we're going to have well-documented notebooks that kind of walk you through, here's an analysis, change this variable here to pull in your cohort instead of the cohort we did in this example. And really help facilitate people getting on quickly. And then we're also making our data dictionary public, and actually a lot of this is exposed to the data browser, which makes it pretty, which facilitates the ability to search quickly and find something. In terms of where we are, we first launched something in Q2 of 2018, and that was really, we are here, the Hello World equivalent for the Research Hub, and talking a little bit about what our components were. We had the ability for people to sign up for updates, and we started releasing things like links to the protocol and the surveys, and then the May release I mentioned and talked mostly about, and then version 3 here that we intend to launch in the winter, which is that really the key feature would be the addition of the Workbench and tools to do individual exploration. So now, hopefully all this will work smoothly. So this is, when you come to the Research Hub, I'm just jumping specifically to the data browser. And there are, I mentioned data snapshots and things like that. As you walk through the page, we have some FAQs and videos, a guide here. We display different EHR domains that we have information for. You can see that these are out of we have a smaller number of EHRs that are curated. Then we have survey questions. We have 104,000 people who have filled out survey questions for the basics and overall health, brief descriptions, and then the program measures. You can go through here.
Josh, does this mean that the data browser currently has roughly 100,000 quality assured participant data uploaded, but there's another 150,000?
Yeah. So we have, in what we call our curated data repository that feeds this, we have pulled together data on about over 100,000 people, and each domain has that different denominator. But exactly, that's exactly true. Now, it's not all perfectly curated, and one of the things I like to say that this is a journey, and our bent is to release data kind of early and often, but we are curating it along the way. So these are passing all the initial quality checks. If someone has, for instance, a diagnosis of hypertension, it doesn't necessarily mean for sure they have hypertension, but it does mean a doctor has entered, a diagnosis for hypertension at some point.
And do you do monthly or quarterly releases?
We think we'll probably end at something like, every 3 or 4 months of release. We're not, at this point, we're kind of letting this flow and see what looks like it becomes the right cadence. When we first launch, we may have that initial release last a little bit longer because we don't want to change too frequently on new users. There's a lot of protocols we talk about. Once you start working in a given data environment, though, you can continue to work in that data environment even if we release a new version. And the same CDR that's under the data browser will essentially feed the Workbench as well. So if we look, for instance, I just mentioned hypertension. It'll query through the data, and you can see that there are 59 corresponding diagnoses here, and you can see a distribution of what they look like and the different percentages of population. Now, this is maybe how a doctor would enter the term, right? So we understand that someone might come in and also look for blood pressure. That we support the sonotomy there, and that supports directly to hypertensive disorder with the synonym high blood pressure, and 35% of the population has that entry. It works obviously for across different things. We mentioned breast cancer, which was mentioned before. And you can see 2.6% of the population has that. And you can go through, and with each of these conditions, you can explore, as you would expect, there's more females diagnosed than males with breast cancer. And in this case, we, to preserve privacy, if there's more than 0, but less than 20, everything is bent in the 20s. So it just says less than 20. I don't know whether there's 1 person, or there's 19, or 20 of them. And each column is going to be grouped at bends of 20. You can see the age distribution across, and a lot of these terms are hierarchical and include a number of component terms. So this would probably be for more power users and physicians, maybe or researchers wanting to explore different sub-diseases or components of this and see what the breakdowns are. maybe not as relevant for breast cancer as it would be for something like heart failure, for instance, where you went to look at systolic and diastolic components like that. Let's say you wanted to look for a particular lab. So I was actually asked this recently by someone submitting a grant, how many of your patients have PSA? So actually I deliberately typed it in the wrong box. I'm in the conditions. And PSA is a lab test, prostate-specific antigen. But it'll tell you that in this case we have raised prostate-specific antigen. And if we go to the data browser main page, we can actually look at the lab measures for that. And as you not surprised, we have more people with the lab measure, and we can look at the distribution. So 7% of the population has that, and we can go through, and it's not surprising that more men had it measured than women. And you can see that, you mentioned about the curation aspect. Being completely honest, not all these labs. We get things, for instance, in different measurements from different users as these different 32 groups are sending us EHR data from over more than 10 different EHR vendors as we work through that. And that is something that we're working on harmonizing across the resource. And I showed you one that has maybe a few more measures than others.
I was just looking at creatinine. It's you would think it's like a renal failure population, but it's not showing up there. I just wonder if you shouldn't have a flag about the ones that really haven't been curated.
So what we are thinking about doing in the process is
Can you repeat the questions for both myself and the people on the bridge, but also for the recording this for open session?
Great question. So the question was, when looking at creatinine, which I'll do now, there are a population, for instance, that is going to have elevated creatinines and have renal disease. And the question was, should we have some sort of flag about the level of curation of these and which ones have been curated or not? And one of the things we're talking about doing especially as people come in and access the individual data, is having what we have defined as our curated data, our clean curated data set, and then the kind of curated raw or all, so that people, if they're looking to do a lab that we haven't yet really harmonized, that they can go in and curate that themselves and still get access to the data, while also knowing that things like creatinine we have harmonized, and the creatinine data here looks very clean in terms of our distributions. Those and they're all in one unit, for instance.
Scroll back up, because there's an interesting. You have like a normal bar and an abnormal bar, and those are totally wacko.
Oh, in the no unit part?
Yeah.
Yeah. So these are a small number of submissions, and
most of them are high.
Most of them are high, right? And I don't know,
doesn't match with your actual data, which looks pretty good.
Right. So this is a group they're submitting the values based on these measurements. It's a categorical value, and maybe we need to work on making that clear that these are different labs than the others. One of the things you can see that most of the counts here are actually the milligram per deciliter, not the high, low, and they're actually different lab submissions. Making it more clear, having the default be the lab that is the more common lab. Great, so I think we're actually officially into question time. Not only by virtue of having questions answered, but I'm actually done with this talk, and I think we want to open the questions across the variety of presentations we've heard this morning from Eric.
Yes, just as a reminder, if you're asking your question, please indicate your name and speak up so that folks on the WebEx can clearly hear you. Thank you.
Sure. This is Greg Simon. So question really following on Rob's question from a minute ago, which has to do with, when you refer to sort of curation or cleaning, sort of as an important philosophical question about, does the browser view, things as they came in, are we intending to sort of just accurately represent what we receive? Or, expecting someone else is going to need to place a layer on top of that to interpret it? Or do we say, no, we really want to ourselves interpose a layer, which is some, whatever you want to call it, value set, computable phenotype, some way of processing that into something which we have somehow vetted? To me, that's sort of an interesting question about how much you want to say it is what it is, or we've actually cleaned it up for you a bit.
Yeah. It's certainly cleaned up a lot from what it comes in. And the question, to repeat just in case, is how much do we want to put a filter on the data and say we've cleaned it up versus the data browser? And this will go for the Workbench too, is, kind of that, this is what we got. This is a topic that I would love to hear more discussion on, especially this afternoon. We'll have a lot of time to have more discussion on this and get your opinions on it as an advisory panel. My view and our initial thoughts are to basically have both of those views, that we everything has a certain degree of curation where they actually have, we have a codified unit behind it. For instance, we have a value. They are being mapped to a standardized term. The data browser is limited to those things that come and match those initial. There's actually other data that doesn't even meet those, initial quality checks, and that we haven't been able to work with the sites to map into standardized vocabularies. And the data browser right now is a little bit in between both of those goals, because we have not produced that completely curated set of 100 labs or so. And that's what we're working with the sites to do now, is to have that kind of squared off. These labs are going to be very high quality, and we're going to, to every degree possible, have those units be mapped, get rid of those that are extreme values, all that kind of stuff. You're going to also have access to the full raw data as well, if you want to look at it as it came in before our set of cleaning rules. I guess our philosophy in the data browser was to sit at a little bit higher level and kind of to show data as it came in, and then in the Workbench have the, here's the cleanest set, this is what these 100 labs are. The diagnoses, for instance, have been all standardized, and here's everything if you want to access everything that we have.
So, for instance, you would, you'd clean up a white count to say some came in as 1,000, some came in as 6,700, some came in as 6.7.
Right.
We'll harmonize that.
Right.
So that you'd say you're not going to just have to represent those which could be orders of magnitude off.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. So the idea is in that clean set, we'll clean up those 6.7 versus 6,700 and have the units all be standardized to a set. You'll have the other data sets as well. We want to move, and we are working actively on actually moving as much as possible the 6.7 and 6,700 to actually computationally harmonize those in the data browser as well. Where we can do it.
Any other sort of topics or questions that you want to deep dive in, even if we don't have time to answer it all now? What are other topics for Josh or for Dara and Consuelo that you want to make sure we get to as we go throughout the day?
Well, we saw a lot about enrollment. I didn't see anything about follow-up. And in my experience so far in similar studies is follow-up is a beast.
Yes, it is. So Rob's question was on follow-up. We saw a lot about enrollment, but not a lot about follow-up. Eric, do you want to take that, or do you want me to talk about it?
It's a great discussion because we're going to have we want some input about broader retention strategies anyway. So I think we should capture these. I don't know if you guys have a whiteboard in the, we should capture these and make sure that we deep dive into all of those.
How confident are you that you have valid email addresses?
That's just how confident are we to have valid email addresses?
The question is, how confident are we that we have valid? I don't know that data well. Does anyone else? Eric, do you or?
Yeah, I mean, what I'll tell you is initially when we started, it's always going to be an issue, particularly in cases where either a direct volunteer partner or a health provider organization partner is helping somebody sign up for email for the first time. It's not necessarily an email that they actually use. Just something that certainly happens. Since when we launched, we only had email, and we've added SMS, which was a request, particularly from specific communities that were like, we use email, but we actually have text messaging. The whole recontactability is clearly a huge issue that we're actually working on, and we've only recently had the analytics in place, and quite frankly, a CRM tool, customer relationships management tool, that allows us to start to see where, the openings of emails, did the email ping back and so forth. I don't know the numbers off the top of my head. Actually, have a follow-up discussion on this and folks to run the analysis on it and sort of talk about it. Our biggest concern is particularly those vulnerable populations that have QHCs or in environments where that email address was created when they came into the clinic or when they came to an event, recontactable through that particular methodology. About 3 months, we'll have a much more nuanced both preference engine about how people actually get communicated to and a wider range of contact options than what we had out of the gate. And we'll have the analytics in place. We can actually start to see it. But it is something that we're concerned about. In general, well, I don't want to make up numbers because I can't remember it. We've got the charts on. Did people actually open the email about the follow-up surveys? Has it not been opened? How many times has it been looked at? We're now basic analytics of that, but I don't want to try to make up numbers off the top. I can't remember it.
I feel the same way about having numbers in my head, and I know if I say one, I'll be precisely wrong. As opposed
I keep thinking I know it, and then I'm like, I'm not sure. I'm like, oh, is that the right chart in my head? But yeah, I don't want to make it up.
I'm sorry, so just doing a time check, we have 2 more minutes for this open session, and then we can once we get into the closed session, we can certainly do a deeper dive into some of these other pressing questions that we have. So we can take one more question before we close this, turn off the recording, go into break for about 10 minutes, and then go into the closed session. So
But this, Greg, a general question, which probably would take way more than 2 minutes, for Darren Consuelo, I guess. When you do this engagement work, if you really do it right, people will disagree. And you can't paper that over, but you need to move forward and make decisions. So I'm just curious about how you worked with that in terms of living in disagreement about things. That's probably a day-long discussion or a lifelong
discussion. Yeah, that's exactly what we talked about when we met with Eric and Consuelo yesterday. We need to figure out the best forum to get the input and to do it in a somewhat of a democratic way by actually asking actual participants what they want, as opposed to researchers who think they know what participants want. But understanding that we're not a one-size-fits-all program. You're going to have differing opinions, even within demographic, racial, and ethnic community groups. So just as in any difficult situation, you have to move forward with the answer that meets the needs of the most people while not causing harm. And how you do that, if I had the answer to that, I wouldn't be sitting in this room. But I think we should discuss it because I think there's some really unique ideas that have been done in various organizations. For example, in my prior organizations, everyone had a vote. That's one way to do it. In many of the, fraternities and sororities, there is a count. In our steering committee, we vote. That's one way to approach it. But I think we have to just figure out how best can we leverage the core values of our program, which in some cases are competitive, and best meet the needs of the overall gestalt of what we're trying to accomplish as a program. And we're going to have some people who won't be happy. But let's hope that we have fewer people that are unhappy than we have that are happy. That's my best kind of rambling answer, but I think we're going to have to figure that out together.
If I could add one thing to that, and Dara brought this up yesterday, is that and I certainly agree that we we have to make sure we're not treating the participants differently than we treat the researchers. Because I think the researchers are disagreeing more than the participants are. And so how are we actually resolving those disagreements? And when there are really disagreements, what's the next step? Are we getting additional information and data to make sure that we have some informed decisions around those things? So let them disagree just like we disagree, I think.
I mean, I'll close out this open session with giving you an example that's live that we're struggling with right now. When we released the public data browser back in May, we made a somewhat last-minute decision to remove the ability for people to be able to search by race, ethnicity, and particularly by tribal affiliation at the direct request of the Tribal Advisory Council for NIH. And out of abundance of respect, and we're in the middle of our process, and I'll give you some updates in a minute about multiple consultations we're doing, as well as listening sessions with different tribes around the country. But the short of it was we erred on the side of caution. The Vanderbilt team worked many midnight weekend hours to change the code base and change the data set before we released it. And Dara is walking through a series of exercises as is Consuelo with our participants and Dara with our community partners to get input about if and when and in what ways in the public data browser should we put in the ability to sort on race and ethnicity. You can imagine a lot of people who don't and remember, it's a public data browser. We don't have any idea who's using it, and headlines can come out where somebody makes a claim that we all know is spurious and not something that you can generate from aggregate statistics of the sort. And it's been kind of like whiplash. Dara will have one session and they'll come back like, oh, they're really mad that we haven't already put the ability to sort by race and ethnicity because they really want us to, as well as some other categories. And then we'll have another session. We come in, it's like, they absolutely don't want us to do this, right? And so, I think hearing that debate and the reasons underneath people's concerns, in some cases we can add capabilities or features or rules that address concerns, and we haven't made the decision about how and when we're going to do that because we're still getting that input. But by definition, no one's going to be perfectly happy because, really different opinions. I think if you focus on the root issues, look at ways that we can address the root issues, as well as then communicate, we thank you for your input, but here's the reasons that we actually made the decision that we did. I think that's the best that we can do right now. But if you guys have ideas about how we can navigate that and take any issue with our program, any single issue, and we get that variety of response, like how do you navigate that? How do you move that forward is the challenge that we face. But don't ask for the input if you're not going to actually use it in paper form, and we're really trying to wrangle with it and use it. With that, I will officially close the open session, and we have a 10-minute break. So I can't see the clock there that you all are operating from, but Tram, let everybody know when they need to be back by, and then we will start with closed session, some deeper dives.
Sure, so I want to make sure everyone gets the 10-minute break, so we will resume at 10:25.